co-founded an organization called Young Ontarians United, which is conducting research on how youth have been impacted by COVID-19.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Caitlin. We'll hear from Lauren now.
Hi, everyone. My name's Lauren. I'm currently going into my 4th year at St. Francis Xavier University, which is a small university in rural Nova Scotia and Antigonish. I'm heading into, I said, 4th year of a joint honors in biology and psychology. This summer, I'm currently doing my thesis research at Dalhousie University in a microbiology lab. I've also done social psychology research at St. FX last summer, and I'm involved in a few extracurriculars on campus, and I've really gotten into podcasting lately.
Awesome. And Mohammed?
Hi, everyone. My name is, obviously, as you just said, Mohammed. I am in 2nd year honors life science, which is basically the general specialization for my program. I'm a research assistant at St. Joseph's Hospital. I'm also a volunteer at my local religious center in a nonprofit organization called Baraka Box, which is basically a local food bank operation. And I also aid teaching Arabic at the HWDSB, which is our district school board, teaching them on Saturdays, like the Arabic language, so that other people who have maybe come to this country and have missed out on their language can learn even more.
Perfect. And Simriti?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Simriti, and I'm going into 2nd year this fall at Western University. I'm studying economics. So I'm finishing up my summer internship at Princess Margaret in their finance department. And I co-founded Unicast, which, if you guys are wondering, is actually pretty similar in terms of the approach we have to, with LEAP. It's actually a digital platform which also helps for career, development. So if you guys want to check that out, just shamelessly putting that out there. But besides that, yeah, I did hold also a position of financial mentor last year. So yeah, I'm just really excited to meet all of you. So hopefully that should go well.
Awesome. Thank you to all of our panelists for coming out tonight. So we're going to get into a couple of main discussion points. We're going to talk about internships and extracurricular opportunities. We're going to talk about academics, mental health, and some final words of wisdom for you all. So we'll jump into our internships and extracurriculars topic. So we want to look at how everyone's experience was applying for competitive internships and whether it's realistic as a first-year student to even get an internship. Simriti, do you want to start with this?
Sure. So the way I see it with internships is it could go 2 ways. So the first way where you could, look at getting an internship is through all the clubs that you apply for. So I'll talk from my perspective, and that's more for, business, and I'll talk because, I'm at Western, so I talk from that perspective, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same for all other universities too. So we have clubs like the Pre-Business Students Network, we have like the Investment Club on campus, and I have to say a lot of these clubs really put out a lot of internship opportunities, a lot of job opportunities, especially towards the end of the year. So one way to really look at, applying for a lot of these internships is through clubs. So kind of coming back to the point of is it realistic? It definitely is. I'm not saying the whole batch would end up with internships very easily, but that's just about, being proactive, putting in the effort, and, really putting yourself forward in all aspects. So that's one way you could definitely look at getting internships, reach out to clubs, reach out to people at clubs. Sometimes they have connections that they could refer to you. And obviously, a part of connections is also leveraging your own personal connections. If you meet seniors somewhere, go out for coffee chats, talk to people, try to understand, what kind of internships there are. So definitely it is competitive. It's competitive in all years, not just first year, to be honest. So it's definitely about, going out there, making those connections, making use of LinkedIn, and making use of all of the opportunities that clubs and other places provide to you at university.
Yeah, that's some great advice. Clubs are definitely a great way to get involved and seek out different opportunities. You had mentioned coffee chats. Do you maybe want to touch briefly on what is a coffee chat for people that maybe don't know?
For sure. So a coffee chat essentially is sort of like a one-on-one that you have with a lot of seniors, and preferably upper year senior students who, who are on the same career path as you. So they can definitely be helpful in understanding, it's kind of like this whole situation once again, but except it's one-on-one. So they have a better understanding of what you're going through. They can kind of advise you in certain things, certain classes to take up, certain, opportunities to take up, and kind of, guide you through it. So it's almost like having a mentor. Depends on how far you take the coffee chat with them, but that's essentially what it is. And that's also something that was really helpful. I leveraged more of those coffee chats towards the end of first year. So that's definitely something that you can look out for too.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the clarification there, Simriti. Caitlin, did you want to hop in here?
Yeah, sure. I definitely second everything Samriti said. I think in addition to clubs and your social media networks and LinkedIn, I think other ways you can find internships is through Google. That's how I found my opportunity to be a delegate at the UN Commission on the Status of Women. I literally was just Googling United Nations opportunities for youth, and I found it, as well as there's another of other internships related to sustainable development goals, etc. I think you can do the same for any other discipline, though, that you're interested in. So potentially business internships, computer science, soft like internships, etc., etc. And then beyond that, I also think that you can find them through oh man, I pulled a blank right there. But yeah, definitely I would say to leverage your skills and your personal brand in order to put yourself in the best position to apply for these things is make sure that you're kind of curating your experiences and like the competitions you're doing to prepare yourselves for these positions. So for instance, if you really want like a business internship, make sure you're doing like case competitions, you're focusing on a specific area that you might be interested in, so that when you go for an interview, for instance, you can really prove that you have some sort of experience or background that will adequately prepare you for a role, even if it's an entry position.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for that, Caitlin. We're going to head on into the next topic of discussion now. Oh, no, we're going to stay on the same one. So how do you apply for a position without past experience? Simriti, did you want to touch on this? You're on mute. No
Sorry
worries, there we go.
Okay, so I've actually had a lot of my friends ask me about this, and I've also heard like a lot of people say, oh, like I only did a summer job at McDonald's, like what am I going to do? I don't really stand out. But to think about it, there's actually so much that you can talk about just like from being a cashier at McDonald's. So it's actually about thinking and sitting down and thinking, what really did I learn from, that specific job? So if I was a cashier, I was able to diplomatically talk to all my customers. That's kind of like a skill you picked up from just being a cashier, which can also be transferred into, the business world or any world for that matter, whatever you're going into. Speaking with customers or speaking with clients diplomatically is one kind of skill that you acquired from just, being a cashier at McDonald's. So something like that, taking any past experience you have, whether that's being on student council and, problem solving, something came up and you were, just a part of the student council and you were able to solve it. That's problem solving right there. Cashier, I just pointed that out. I feel like if you really look, sit down and look at every kind of EC you've had in the past and, just try to think 2 or 3 things that you were really able to get out of that. Being able to express that in your interviews, in your resume, and even all the applications, I think that's an important skill to sort of focus on, more than just begging a lot of these positions and not really getting much out of it. So definitely, I feel like it's okay to apply for all these positions without having too much of job or internship experiences. It's more about all of the activities that you did in high school and what you really got out of it.
Absolutely. Caitlin, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, sure. So as you can see on the screen, my biggest tip is to start small. I know a lot of clubs at U of T, for instance, especially since things like the student union or like drama clubs, even like the debate club, have entry-level positions like first-year representatives, or specifically positions reserved for individuals who don't have background experience, to really encourage individuals to get involved. So that being said, you definitely want to leverage your first year, because that's usually what the positions are reserved for, because they think that usually first years are the ones with less experience, so it allows you to be competitive with like upper years. So definitely take advantage of first year to be able to have those, and to have that entry into these sort of clubs or positions that you might want to get into. And also never negate your volunteer experience. I always love telling people that your volunteer experience is experience. Because you weren't paid for something doesn't mean that you can't be paid for it in the future, or it can't be something that's equally as valuable when you're applying to a job, because like Samriti mentioned, these transferable skills are incredibly important. And then finally, I think this is something that's overlooked by a lot of individuals, is that organizations prefer to recruit individuals who have already been part of their group for a while. So even if you're not able to get an executive position on your first year, it is really worthwhile just to stay in the club or the organization for the full year if you really care about it, because then you'll be more likely to get a position rather than just like quitting the club and then re-entering in second year. So yeah, that's my advice.
Awesome, thank you. And segueing a bit from internships into research positions, Caitlin, do you want to touch on how people can go about getting research positions without cold emailing, or maybe they've already tried cold emailing and it's not working out for them? Do you have any other advice?
For sure. I would just say before getting into the alternatives, I do really believe in cold emailing because it's worked for me in the past. So if you're cold emailing and it isn't working, keep at it. I sent about 40 emails and only got 2 responses that were yeses, but still one of those panned out into a meaningful experience for me. So I just encourage you and try to motivate you to say that it is worth it, but it requires a little bit of perseverance. But that being said, alternatives, the first ones I would say is look at seminar courses. So seminar courses are ones that are typically smaller classrooms so that you have a little bit more of one-on-one experiences with the professor. And because of that, you can bond with the professor. You can talk to the professor after class to, discuss a further point that they brought up that you thought was interesting. They probably will more likely remember your essays that you're writing. And if you write a really good essay, sometimes that will leave such an impact on them that they might even offer you a position right there. That's what happened to one of my friends in first year. So for instance, at U of T, there's the one programs, and there's also first year learning community. So definitely look at, every university has these sort of programs. I just use the U of T examples because I'm a student there. Secondly, there's also competitions which allow the winners to have internships, mentorships, or funding to actually fund your own research project, which are super cool. So I'd say keep your eyes peeled for those things. There's research programs, which I think are really cool because those are often hosted by research institutions or hospitals. And specifically, they're often run during the summer when you have lots of time to dedicate to a research program. So for instance, some of them online, but there's so many more, like St. Mike's, pretty much Princess Margaret Cancer Institute, literally every single major research institution usually has a student summer program. And the best part is that you can even get started at some of them in high school. You don't even need to be a university student for some of them. And then lastly, I just noted courses. So there's the research opportunity courses at a lot of universities, or work study positions. And those ones, you just search up the postings on your career center website, and then you just apply to them like you would apply to any other job.
Awesome. Thank you for all that info. I've never personally applied for a research position, so I've definitely learned something there. And how would you go about starting your own club, Caitlin?
So unfortunately, I have never gone through the process of this at my own university, but I have been part of registering the club for re-registering it, because every year you have to become re-recognized by the club, even if you were recognized the previous year. So it's not so much paperwork, but sometimes you do need to secure a faculty member to be kind of like a supervisor for your club, or just like a mentor. So I think that's probably the hardest part, because you have to convince a professor usually to believe in your club and be willing to put their name beside yours on the paperwork. And then other than that, you don't actually need to be recognized by the student union. It just means that you don't get funding. So there's tons of non-official clubs that run at U of T, for instance, and they're completely legitimate. They're allowed to operate, they're allowed to usually book spaces because they're students, but they just don't get funding because they're not recognized by the student union.
Yeah, that's definitely some great advice. I know for Western, some things are a little bit different there. So definitely check out your school's websites and just search, your school plus clubs, and hopefully you'll be able to find some school specific info about clubs online. So we'll go into academics now. So Lauren, nice open-ended question for you. What are the best resources that you can use in university?
So I think the best one to start off with is go to your university's Student Success Center. It might be called something different at your institution, but to my knowledge, every university has their own place where they hire trained professionals, sometimes with master's degrees. I've met some with PhDs, and there's a writing center. There's usually hookups for you can be matched with tutors. Yeah, so, and they also have academic workshops as well. So I've seen academic workshops on procrastination, how to avoid procrastination, managing your time well, and how to effectively get research done for your essays, your papers. And there's also some resources that I found in my own life. Library Genesis is a great resource for free online textbooks. Sci-Hub is basically like it unlocks the paywall for a lot of academic papers. Slater is a great one for physics and math answers. I found they also have a lot of different subjects as well. And something that I didn't put on the slide was I really recommend creating a folder, whether it be on Safari or Google Chrome, just a folder where you can keep links before the school year starts for each of your courses, and kind of curate a list of resources that you can go to. And it's really helpful when you are one day out from your calculus midterm and you're really struggling to find textbook answers, you're really struggling to find a good explanation online, and you can just go to that folder and check out what you found at the beginning of the year.
Awesome. Thanks for all of those resources, Lauren. Definitely good idea to check out resources at whatever school everyone's going to. And Mohammed, do you want to touch on getting to know your professors, and how would someone go about doing that?
Okay, so personally, what I found would be most effective was actually cold emailing. That worked to our benefit because there was a group of students from third year who actually approached all the first years and said, if you guys want, we're going to basically go through all of the hospital institutions that are at our school, and any professors that are in that field. We would get all of their contact information, what is their research objectives, and what is their focus on research. So then after that, you'd basically be able to look at an Excel folder and find all of their contact information, what their interests are, and basically be able to engineer an email that would stand out for them, because you are expressing interest not only in a position but also in the field that they want, which makes you a more lucrative member. Also, I have found that approaching the professors during office hours or after lectures actually helped a lot. So if I would go down to my calculus professor and ask like an intuitive question, she would be surprised, like, oh, well, that someone's expressing interest, and she would like say, okay, come to my office hours and we can discuss this more. And after that, I found that she was asking me more questions. She was more intrigued by me as a student, like, what are your interests, what do you want from like your university experience? And that actually helped me create a more healthy relationship with the professor, which is very hard to actually create in a big institution like many of students are going to.
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed. Lauren, did you want to add to that?
Sure, I just want to echo everything Mohammed said. Definitely go to your prof's office hours. My aunt is a neuropsychology prof at U of T, and she says that the hours where she blocks off office hours for students to come ask questions are the most free hours of her week, because not enough students take advantage of office hours. And it's an absolute shame, because you can really build relationships and connections with your professors. So my advice would be attend departmental presentations. Sometimes the department invites guest speakers to come present their research. And a lot of times there's like a mix and mingle kind of feature afterwards. This might look different because of COVID this year. But even if it's on Zoom, don't be afraid to shoot a message to a professor, or even follow up with an email afterwards saying, hey, I attended your presentation. I was very interested in your research, and just build that connection. Show that you're interested by attending the workshop or the lecture, and then go from there. And then there's also sometimes student-run clubs run student faculty mixer events. I know that at my school, we sometimes have like a mix and mingle for the biology faculty. So students can come and get to know their professors in a more relaxed manner, not at a departmental lecture series. So that's also great to build those relationships early on as well.
Absolutely, that's definitely some great advice. All right, we're looking at the difference between lectures, labs, and tutorials. Panelists, who wants to take this one? Just do a super quick run through of the differences. Mohammed, go ahead.
Sure. So basically for lectures, you're all just basically gathered around and just watching the professor presenting the information to the students. This would be the most information condensed periods, because the instructor is personally giving you that information, which means that most often than not, you will find that information actually on your midterms or exams. And then after that, you have your labs, which are usually at my university, a large portion, and they require more effort in terms of being able to be prepared for it before class. You have to be able to know what you're going to do, whether that's from watching YouTube videos or whatever information manuals they gave to you. And tutorials are a smaller group session with a TA, which is more relaxed, and you're able to ask more questions that you might not want to ask your professor about. They're also more willing to give you more assistance personally than like a professor who'd be giving that help to the whole class. No, that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. And we have a question at the bottom here. We're going to move on to the next topic, but panelists, if you just want to message in the chat what your experience was with your grades coming from high school to university. Did they go up? Did they go down? Did they stay the same? And maybe if you're comfortable approximating, so did your grades drop 5%, 10%, that kind of thing? Just to give everyone a bit of a clarification on that. We're gonna jump into mental health now. So what are common causes for university students to feel dejected when they're going through their schooling? Simriti, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So definitely for me, actually, being an international student, I did feel homesick at some time, and I felt like, so for me, I felt like my residence wasn't high on the social aspect as much as other residences. So definitely factor all of that in. Those can be, common causes for why you feel dejected sometimes, and social interaction is a huge part of our lives, and I feel like quarantine really made us realize that too. So this year might be a little different, but capitalize on all of the groups on Facebook. Make sure you're reaching out to people, even if it's through DM or like Messenger or whatever it is. It can be awkward, yes, but it's the only way you're going to make friends. So keep that in mind. And other ways you could feel dejected is obviously, feeling overwhelmed by the amount of work that's thrown at you. I remember having 3 exams within 24 hours, and I was like, oh my God, I haven't had to deal with this ever in my entire life. But just tell yourself that you're going to get past it anyway. It's a learning point. You may not do as well as you expect in those 3 exams, but you would learn how to deal with your time and, just deal with studying way better for the rest of the year. So definitely keep that in mind too. And don't compare yourself to other students. I did that so much. I always felt like everyone was on top of their game and everyone had all aspects of their experience covered. But getting to know them eventually on a personal level, I realized everyone is going through their own struggles. So definitely don't compare yourself to other people. And yeah, that's kind of my personal experience with university.
Awesome, thank you. And Mohammed, did you want to go now?
Okay, yeah. So for me, I believe that a common cause for students to feel dejected was that they would prioritize their academics way over their mental health. And I don't mean by like, just enjoy your time and just party and don't study because you don't want to feel any ounce of stress. But also I have a bunch of friends who, when we first entered McMaster, we would say, okay, because of the midterms that are right after the first month, everybody decided like, oh, I'm going to study 17 hours a day. And then I'm going to go to the lectures for 5 hours and then sleep for the remainder of the day. Like that doesn't work. You have to be able to understand your limits and say, okay, I'm going to do my best, but that also means that I can't just all of a sudden open a book and go 24 hours a day. So timing yourself in terms of being able to say, okay, it's better that I study 2 hours every single day than I wait till the day before the midterm. And then after that, I dedicate whatever 15 hours of that day. Because not only will you feel extremely stressed compared to if you had been more prepared, but also you'll have like some weird stuff. So I know a bunch of people that began like throwing up and all of this because they had made such a huge mistake of being able to say, okay, you know what, I'll remember or I'll recall more information if I memorize it the day before than actually before. And that is something that even our university had focused on telling us from the beginning, that like the Pomodoro's technique or any techniques like that are better when you recall small pieces of information over a larger amount of time than if you do or dedicate the last 2 or last day for preparing for a midterm or exam.
That's some great advice. Do you have anything to add, Lauren?
Sure. So if you're transitioning from high school to university this fall or in the future, it's gonna be a big change in every area of your life. So you might move to a different city or town or even province or country. You're gonna get a new group of friends. You'll be away from your family, perhaps for the first time in your life. And you're gonna experience an academic rigor that you've never experienced before. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. But I think the biggest challenge for a lot of students is just missing the routine of your old life. Like you're stepping into a new version of yourself, new commitments, a totally new social group, a new way of learning as well. So it's totally natural to feel that you want to go back to a simpler time, a more familiar time. But I find that this is a pretty temporary stage. It's really common in first year. Don't worry if you experience it. I think it's quite a shared experience, and eventually you'll come to really enjoy your new life.
Awesome. And I know we touched a little bit on taking care of our mental health in school when we were talking about some of these issues that may come up. Caitlin, did you want to maybe tackle this first?
Oh yeah, sure. So like how I personally took care of my mental health this past year?
Absolutely.
Oh, sure. So for me, I think it was three main things, which I outlined on the screen. Firstly, a large thing in my life is my religion and my faith. And I think the mindset that I kind of entered when going into university, and I think this was also really helpful for just me overall, because like this past year, I was telling my friends and family about this, is that funny enough, I feel like it's the year that I've been the least stressed in my entire like recent life, because I think I adopted like a better, more positive mindset. And it was in trusting that everything happens for a reason, that things work out in the end, that even if like one door closes, like another window opens. So I think that that's really helped me deal with rejection, because funny enough, I've applied to a lot of things this year and I've gotten rejected from a number of things, but I think it's good because, you know, without me trying to get all these different positions, I wouldn't have been able to get other positions. Like I would never be able to be a speaker at LEAP, or I would never be able to be a youth delegate at Young Diplomats of Canada if I didn't just try, right? So I think that when you approach rejection, like the thing that I usually like to think about is that there's a reason that you were rejected, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's you personally. Like it could be you, like you might be lacking qualifications, but there's also a lot of other things that hires like consider, such as like organizational culture, like your values. Sometimes like if you're not compatible working at a position, then you're probably happier not being accepted to that position. So I think that's like the mindset that I kind of took on this year, and that like even when things go badly, I kind of just looked to the future. Secondly, just having a strong support system. Like I have some really amazing friends and family, my fellowship group that I can turn to whenever I'm stressed, to debrief and also to like receive advice and support. And I think that's really important. And even just being able to talk about your issues, I think that's really important when you're being stressed about something, because if you internalize it, then it just keeps getting worse, right? But if you can talk about it and just like let it out, I think that's when you can help solve it. And then lastly, making lists. This is something just for me. I think the main source of stress is like I have this fear that I'm going to forget something, whether that's like forgetting a class, forgetting tests, forgetting homework. So by making lists the night before I go to sleep, it helps me go to sleep like with peace of mind, knowing that I'm not going to forget anything the next day, and it sets me up well for the next day. So yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I love lists. I'm a list expert in that regard with you there, Caitlin. Lauren, did you have anything on this topic that you wanted to touch on?
Sure. So, I mean, everyone handles things differently. Some people prefer to keep their feelings to themselves and maybe journal. But at least for me personally, I've found that talking to people is the best way to go. So try to build a support system early on, identify your supports, and when you are feeling overwhelmed, just talk to people. I mean, this year, just having those deep conversations with friends and finding out that we were all going through a bit of a rough time in first year. And imagine if we had said that in first year, and if we had actually opened up to each other in first year. Imagine how much easier our lives would have been, and how much easier we would have gotten through those struggles. So everyone tends to be going through something at some point of their lives. So you could be helping someone else even by opening up about your own struggles. Something else I would suggest is schedule breaks. Schedule time to recharge and don't feel bad about it. If you do schedule time to recharge, you'll find your performance actually improves in school, in other areas of your life, extracurriculars. So don't be afraid to take time to yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Mohammed, did you have anything that you want to add? Maybe you can touch on the question at the bottom there, how universities are addressing mental health.
Sure. So I know at my faculty, we have various people you can talk to, sort of like guidance counselors, where you can speak to them about the difficult problems that you're having. There's also the Student Accessibility Center, where you can find basically any person. It would pair you up with a grad student or something like that, where you can speak to them about your journey and what you're worried about. And then after that, they would be able to say, okay, actually, when I was in first year, this is what happened to me. And basically they'll just remind you that like everything's okay, and you're just basically going through every single challenge that everybody that has been in university has done. So I know for a lot of times, like when I was studying for my midterms or anything like that, I would choose like a specific room, like a tutorial room at night, and I would study there. But after studying there for like maybe like 10 or 12 days, I'd become like so stressed whenever I walk up those stairs to that tutorial room. So I'd have to change my setting where I'd be studying, because like any time that I would think about it, and it was the brick science building, whenever I think about that, I'd be like, oh my God, no, not chemistry again. So definitely try to change your atmosphere when you're studying. So go to Starbucks, go to wherever you want, and also make sure that you are taking your time with studying and also fitting in parts of your life. So a lot of people say that university is the best years of your life. Make sure to focus on that, because you're going to have a hard time believing that if you spend your whole time studying and not actually gaining new experiences, meeting new people, because these are the things that you're going to recall. Unless it's for your work, I have a hard time believing you're going to be recalling like academic lectures or anything like that. You're going to focus on any experiences, any groups, any new friends that you've made. So make sure to highlight that and say, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to make sure to get these two while I'm studying.
Yeah, that's definitely some great advice. I know for me, I can't even remember what I learned in lectures this year, nevertheless last year, right? So at the end of the day, you just want to focus on enjoying yourself and making the most out of your experience. We're going to move into the final advice section. So Simriti, what is your best piece of advice that you want to give first year students?
Right. So taking from what Mohammed and like everyone else said in the last segment, actually, it's obviously about finding a good balance between studying and going out. So making sure that you get that interaction, you meet people, you make those memories. Definitely, it's so important to do that. And like Mohammed just mentioned, you're not going to look back and be like, hey, I got a 90 in this class. Like, sure, in the moment it feels like it's everything, but you will get past it and you realize that getting that 90 and getting an 85 would probably lead you to the same place. So don't focus too much on academics till the point where it stresses you out and you lose, all sense of clarity and whatnot. So definitely keep that in mind. But more than that, I also want to add on to the point I have on the screen and say that this is the best time to try out anything that you've ever thought of doing, because you have to realize that you're walking into a new place. Let's say 90 to 95% of people at university probably don't know you. So it's that time of your life where you get to remold yourself and you get to make the best of yourself. So I'll give you a short example. I am very athletic. I saw the football game for the first time during my orientation week, and I was like, oh my God, cheerleading looks so cool. I want to try it out. Spoiler alert, I never became cheerleader. I can't even flip for my life, but I tried out and it was fun. So made for a fun story. You know what? So that's all that it is, to university. Make sure that you're trying out everything that you probably thought you couldn't do, but you just want to give it a shot, because worst case scenario will make for a good story. Best case, you might just get it. So definitely keep that in mind.
Absolutely. It doesn't hurt to try, right?
Yeah.
Mohammed, did you want to hop in here?
Yeah, sure. So, I wanted to highlight that when you're going into like any institution, you're gonna have thousands of students. So if you didn't have, if you had difficulty finding new friends back in your high school and felt that you were like, you weren't being able to basically expose your best true self because you're afraid of whatever, your school will have like 30,000, like thousands of people. So there's definitely going to be at least one or even 5 or 10 people that are like you, like have the same interest as you. So when I personally went into like tutorials or whatever, I wouldn't try to be afraid. I would just try to speak to everybody and try to find anybody that was also in my shoes, so in the same program, and had the same interests. And don't lose yourself. So if you have like sport interests, don't say like, oh, because of university, I'm going to start focusing on school and I'm going to give that up. Even if you can't compete at whatever level. I used to play provincial soccer, and it was very taxing because I had to have practice in Toronto 5 times a week and a game in maybe sometimes Montreal, sometimes Vancouver. I was not going to be able to do that with school, but I just downgraded my level, but I still played soccer because that is something that I use personally to de-stress and prevent mental exhaustion from just constantly studying. So don't lose yourself, and try to make as many new friends as possible that have the same interests as you.
Yeah, that's some really great advice. Lauren.
Sure. So I'd say my biggest piece of advice for first years is to get involved from day one. I think I made a mistake in that I was kind of waiting for the perfect extracurricular opportunities to present themselves. I was waiting to curate the perfect list of extracurriculars and volunteer opportunities and job positions, so that my CV would look, again, quote, perfect, that my application to professional school would look perfect. But that just totally paralyzed me. And I ended up joining a few things that I ended up sticking with, but I could have done more. And I kind of wish that I stepped outside of my comfort zone, tried some things, and worst case scenario, you just don't join the next year. But yeah, definitely try to step outside of your comfort zone. Get involved with whatever seems interesting. At the same time, don't overload yourself, but find meaningful activities. And if it doesn't work for you, then that's fine. If it does, then keep rolling with it.
Absolutely. Caitlin, go ahead.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. I'd say the two pieces of advice that I really appreciated getting is firstly, in terms of your extracurriculars, I think a lot of people get lost in like trying to just get as many as possible so you can fill up your list and say, I'm part of 20 plus clubs, or I'm like part of all these different organizations. And I think what I've learned over the years is that like quality truly is better than quantity. Having meaningful experiences that are more long term, that you enjoy more, that are more meaningful to you both personally and professionally, are better for you in the long run. Like not only will you enjoy them more and you'll get more fulfillment out of them, but it also shows through on interviews when you're talking about your experiences, right? If it was something that you were just not engaged with, you're not going to talk about it so vividly, and you're not going to have derived as much like value from it. And then secondly, also don't be afraid to cold email or message individuals. What I mean by this is like go on LinkedIn, and if there's someone who you think is super cool within your area of study, like hit them up, say like, I'm a high school student who's super interested in like policy, and I see that you have had experiences in this organization that does policy, and you do this sort of policy advocacy, which I think is awesome. Would you give any advice to someone who's in high school who wants to get involved in this? And you'd be surprised at what can happen, because people are really awesome and they really enjoy helping others. So I've reached out to a couple people like that and have gotten really positive responses. So I would highly encourage you guys to do the same.
Absolutely. And, we have 4 amazing panelists right here, and all of them have volunteered their time to be here. They're not getting paid, they're not being coerced or anything. And so they're 4 great resources for you all that you can reach out to on LinkedIn or any other social media platforms afterwards as well. We're going to hop on to the next slide. So a lot of us are going to go into remote learning this year, maybe for the first time in our lives. And what are some tips on creating a productive schedule for remote learning? Simriti, do you want to start?
Sure. So one thing I discovered in my first year was using Google Calendar. It's actually annoying because it keeps reminding you every second hour of your day, but that's actually what's going to keep you on top of things, because when you keep seeing that reminder pop on your phone, you're going to be like, okay, I kind of have to get this done and I have to get it done ASAP. So maybe, there's Outlook calendar too, so that works better for you. Kind of finding one of those applications which, works best for you. And especially with, school being online this year, it's important because it's really easy to just miss deadlines without even noticing it. So really, if you work better with calendars, the ones you stick on the walls, make sure you have that in your room, or just using these online calendars. Definitely that's one way to have all your deadlines and all of your routines in place, so that you don't miss anything and you kind of get into that routine of doing work every single day.
Awesome. And Mohammed?
Yeah, so personally for me, I would say create a schedule where you're balancing your studying and your personal affairs. So whether it's Netflix or TikTok or whatever it is, make sure that you leave a time for that after you're actually completed, after you've actually completed studying, in order to like basically not say, okay, I'm gonna try to go through this as fast as I can and so I can get to my Netflix show. No, make sure that you're prioritizing your school, but also leave time for that in order to like prevent what we were earlier speaking about. So that's like mental exhaustion. And also, I don't mean to be pessimistic, but don't study on your bed. It's just never gonna work. I find that for me, if I study on my bed, I'd have maybe done a good 5 minutes before I'm back to sleep. So when you're creating your environment personally for studying, either get a desk or go downstairs to your living room. So then after that, if you're living at home, your mom will scream at you, and make sure that you're actually studying and not just upstairs watching Netflix. So that would be basically what I would say in terms of creating a productive schedule for remote learning.
Awesome. Thank you. And Lauren, go ahead.
I'd say treat your day as a series of appointments. So again, with the calendar idea, schedule your classes, schedule any office hours that your profs may host online, schedule any extracurriculars, any meetings you have to attend, but also schedule your study time. So let's just say you have your biology lecture at 2 to 3 p.m. And then afterwards, schedule your time to go over what you wrote down in class and go over those notes and treat it as an appointment. So you don't want to not show up for an appointment. So really try to keep yourself to that schedule. And if you fall off the rails a little bit, that's fine too. Tomorrow's a new day. Don't get too rigid in scheduling your time, but just to keep yourself consistent and working at a good pace, I think scheduling is the way to go. And something else that I think really helps is the Pomodoro technique. It's when you schedule 25, sometimes 50 minutes of intense focus. You choose one task to focus on and really eliminate all distractions and work as hard as you can for that period of time, followed by a 5 to 10 minute break, and repeat the cycle for a few times and then take a longer break. And there's also this website I like to use called FocusMate, and it gives you a partner, so an actual person on the other end of the line that kind of holds you accountable. So you are doing this Pomodoro session together. There's no chatting or anything. It's strictly work. But I found it does keep you accountable, and it really keeps you on track. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. Thank you. And we're going to go on to the next question here. So people are wondering, what does the timeline look like for applying to university? I know for myself personally, I don't remember too well what my timeline was looking like. But maybe one of the panelists, if you remember what your approximate timeline looked like for when you started looking at universities, when did you submit your applications? Were there any additional components to the process? Does anyone want to take a stab at this?
I could take a stab at this. I'm only a second year, so it was only about a year ago that I was, 2 years ago, that I was applying for university. So I'd say it's really up to you. I know some people, especially if you're applying to the States, for instance, you need to sort of think about it at least 6 months in advance. So like in your end of the grade 11 year, you have to start thinking about it because you need to ensure your SATs are written or your ACTs are written, because I think those are generally mandatory across many American schools, but I was only interested in applying to Canadian schools. So for me, I hadn't started thinking about it that seriously until basically the end of August, right before grade 12. And then basically in September, October time, you get, if you're an Ontario student like I was, you get like this PIN number that you then go online to, darn, what's the website called? Can one of the other panelists help me out? Basically, it's the Ontario Colleges Admission Center. I just can't remember what the exact website is called. And then you go onto that website, and then basically it's pretty simple because after you already pick out all your programs, which you can do easily on a site called eInfo. I think I can link it into the chat afterwards, but you look up eInfo, you can find all your programs across all Ontario universities at least. You have to do a specific other applications for other provinces universities. After that, you just list them on that website that I mentioned, and then you pretty much just like arrange for your grades to be sent in, but they're sent in automatically, so you don't actually have to like personally send it. Oh, OUAC, thank you so much to everybody who typed it in, yes. So that's for Ontario, but then obviously if you're applying for like UBC, McGill, like U of Calgary, U of Alberta, like I think they all have other systems that if you're not applying to an Ontario university.
Awesome. And is anyone here on the panel not from Ontario, or did anyone experience any other application processes?
Yeah, so at St. FX, which is in Nova Scotia, it was a single application. So with OUAC, I applied to 3 schools in Ontario. So with OUAC, you have one application, your grades automatically get sent through the OUAC system. But for St. FX, I had to send in my transcripts myself. I filled out an independent application just on the St. FX website, and I heard back within 2 weeks. They're very strict with their "we'll get back to you in 2 weeks" policy. I think applications open in around mid-September. I'm not sure what it'll be like this year with the unforeseen circumstances, but yeah, no, it was a very easy application. Just fill out your personal information and send in your transcripts, and you'll hear back soon.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Lauren. Yeah, Google is honestly going to be your best friend this year, everyone, especially for looking at timelines. You know, Google a school you're looking at and just say, you know, timeline for this program, or when do I apply it? When's the deadline? And a lot of that stuff you'll be able to find online. And pivoting off of this, one of our panels next week is going to be solely focused on university applications. So how do I find the right school for me? How do I fill out those applications? What do I write about in my extracurricular essays? So make sure you definitely come out next week and check that out, where we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we're going to go into our Q&A period. So everyone in the audience, feel free to send your questions in the chat, and people can kind of we'll start answering them as they come in. So I know we were talking in the chat about timelines for recruiting and club leadership opportunities. We got some answers in the chat about that, but did any of the panelists want to touch on that live over video? All right, we can move to the next question then. What are some of the best ways to make meaningful connections in an online environment? Simriti, did you want to take this one?
Sure. So I would say one way to obviously is the social group that you might be a part of at your specific university. But then again, that social group can be vast. It could be like 4,000, 5,000 students. So I feel like the next sort of niche group that you might be a part of would be a lot of these study groups, especially for your classes and, you know, your lab tutorials and stuff like that. So definitely make use of that. If you have live classes, you'll probably see a couple of faces on Zoom. And, you know, if you plan on just asking them, oh, hey, you want to, study together from this time to this time, or you want to, clarify some doubts, I feel like that would be one way to sort of get about the study aspect, and you're finding a lot of people through classes. But I feel like with COVID this year, everyone's going to be in the same boat as you socially. So don't be afraid to really just message people randomly saying, hey, I saw you on this group, or hey, I saw your post on this social group. I feel like you're a fun person to talk to, blah, 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 something like that. So, somewhere along those lines is definitely one way you could do. And of course, if you're going back to residence, that's the perfect place to meet people. don't be shy and just reach out to the person next to you, or just anywhere on campus. Definitely that's one way to go about meeting people this year.
Yeah, that's definitely some great advice. We have a question about part-time jobs and balancing that while studying. Did any of you have a part-time job and want to chime in on that? No? Okay, I can take this one.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Caitlin.
I have a very, very part-time job, but I also am the executive director of Light, so I feel like that's sort of a part-time job because it requires about 10 hours a week. So I don't know if that constitutes as a part-time job, but I'll just kind of talk about that experience. I think for me, it's really important to block off time that you do one thing and the other. I think for a job, obviously, you're kind of forced to be at a job, but for me, because this is volunteering work, it's sort of flexible. And for me, I really need to just designate time for studying and for like checking my emails, doing logistic work and stuff like that. And it's very easy to blur them because you'll be studying and you'll be like, okay, well, this is getting boring. Let me check my emails. And then it'll become like an hour later of checking emails, right? So I think it was really important that you designate time to specifically study, and you also know where to set your priorities, right? You know when to say like, okay, I need to prioritize studying for a course because if I don't study for this midterm, then my grades are going to suffer as a result of it. So I think it's about blocking off time for each of them and also like knowing your limits, like when you need to prioritize school instead.
I also wanted to add on that. I just wanted to say that also try to find basically a job where your manager or whoever it is that's going to be leading you, so your boss, is understanding enough to basically realize that you are a university student and therefore you do have midterms that you might need to study for. So don't get into jobs where you're working very, very often so that the day before your midterm or even the day of your midterm, you have work before that. And it's one of those cutthroat jobs where, okay, if I miss another shift, I'm actually going to get fired, and I want to keep this job for the next couple of years in case you're applying to graduate school or whatever, and you want to show that you're a committed person that's been working for many years and has been able to balance your academics and your professional career. So make sure to find maybe managers that are also university students, whoever they are, and they'll understand that, you might have these midterms that you have to prioritize because this is shaping your future. So you will need to be able to take more time off and take like late shifts, where I know one of my friends works at Hollister, where it's like only 3 hours once every single 2 or 3 weeks, where it's just a little bit of money, but it also is a job that you have been doing for a couple of years and you're able to balance it and give your shifts to other people if you believe that you won't be able to complete it.
Yeah, that's great, Mohammed. Thank you for that. There's a question here about making a LinkedIn profile. We are running out of time, but I actually did a podcast and blog episode with my librarian from my high school the other day about LinkedIn. So I'm going to link that in the chat there. Feel free to check that out. It's like a 15-20 minute video and kind of runs through how to set up a LinkedIn profile for students and some of the cool features on LinkedIn. So feel free to check that out. We'll go over this one last question. Do you have any advice on how to meet people and maintain a good social life while also balancing good grades and studying properly and effectively? So touching on that time management and that school social life balance. Does anyone want to take that question?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say that again, just going back to the scheduling. So you block off your hours for classes and studying, and then hold that social time as a reward. And again, that's not to be too stringent with it, and totally deny yourself of those social connections if you don't accomplish everything on your to-do list. But kind of keep it as an incentive, but also give yourself that time to recharge and connect with others regardless of your work status, and make sure to reach out when you are feeling overwhelmed, or even just really are craving that social connection. That's totally fine too.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that, Lauren. So we're running out of time here. So we're going to move over to the contact slide. So thank you again to all of our panelists for coming out today. If you're interested in getting in touch with them, we have their LinkedIn's on there, and you can reach out to them on LinkedIn, send them a message, and they'd be happy to continue these conversations, answer any further questions that you have. We're going to go on to, and panelists, feel free to send your social links in the chat if you want, for people to connect with you as well. We're going to touch on a event right here. So Ignition Hacks 2020 is a free virtual hackathon that runs from August 21st to 23rd and is targeted towards middle school, high school, and university students. And over the course of 3 days, the event will introduce participants to artificial intelligence and its various applications through a series of workshops and seminars featuring guest speakers. Participants can work by themselves or in groups of up to 4 members. So feel free to check out Ignition Hacks if you're looking for something to do, keep yourself busy this week, and learn something new. As I mentioned, we have an upcoming webinar next week, which is our last Tuesday Talks webinar of the summer. It's crazy how fast the summer has flown by, but we'll be talking about university prep for either people coming into the end of their high school career or maybe people in the middle of their high school career looking ahead to applying to post-secondary. And then we're also going to have a panel featuring Waterloo and Laurier students. So we're going to take a quick break right now. And then if you're interested in learning more about McGill University, feel free to stay on and we'll start the next half of the panel in a couple minutes. So thank you everyone for coming and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, Matt.